Love is our true divine nature, and our heart serves as the intersection of the spiritual and physical, connecting our soul with our body as the conduit for anchoring our divinity onto the earth plane. Embodying our divinity is the key to our ascension and to manifesting our highest destiny in this life. The teachings of the heart are alchemy. Join spiritual mentor and channel Jennifer Spohr each week on a sacred journey to lift the veil to remembering your divinity and meet other beautiful souls who are living the path of the awakened heart. Hey everyone, it's my real pleasure to welcome as a guest to the show today, Dr. Jacob Kendall. He helps patients, caregivers, and providers do better at heart disease and, by extension, life in general. Welcome to the show, Jacob. I'm excited to have this chat with you today.
Yeah, Jennifer, thanks for the opportunity. This is a unique conversation, as you can tell from my introduction. I do a lot of podcasts related to health and chronic disease and aging, so I'm glad to have a different opportunity here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on this show. As you know, you and I were just having a discussion before we hit record today that, everything, I believe that everything is interconnected. And so the expertise and input that you're going to share with us today about health and any of the other topics that will come forward, I think is going to be of immense value. So I'm excited to have this chat with you.
Expertise is probably a stretch, but I'm excited for the conversation too.
Well, I don't know. I find my conversation with you to be pretty informative. So, anyways, whatever we want to call ourselves today, like this chat's going to be packed full of value. So I'm excited to have it.
All right.
So there were a couple of things specifically I wanted to ask you about, but before we, kind of dive into the deep end, I'd love for you to share with us more about the work that you do overall and really what inspired you to that path.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so, in helping patients and caregivers navigate our very inefficient American healthcare system. I've been a patient myself, hundreds and hundreds of healthcare encounters. I've had two open heart surgeries, three valve replacements. I have various other issues go on. And so I typically say I have lifelong complex medical needs. That's the personal side. The professional side is I much prefer to approach any issue from a broadly interdisciplinary perspective. I have formal training and professional experience in biology and social work and public health, gerontology, and I'm currently studying theology. And I would much prefer to be a jack of all trades rather than an expert of one. Now, we need experts. I'm really damn glad that the two surgeons who did my heart valve replacements are really, really, really good at that particular kind of surgery.
Yeah, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
But we also need broadly interdisciplinary perspectives. I think that there are so many different angles to approach any given issue. That's definitely going to hopefully shine through in the conversation and the things I say in the conversation today. But with those two things come together, interdisciplinary approach or multidimensional approach, with my own personal experiences with healthcare and sorry, I hit my mic. Basically I got so frustrated with health over time, push became shove, and so I'm shoving back. Bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, to all of that. I would love for you to share your thoughts or as you know, right, that kind of third dimensional, that sort of tunnel vision. I'm at a loss for words of like what is exactly the term that I want to use, but it does really function sort of in a lot of ways like a one-sided way. And as we know,
Yeah.
beyond what many doctors are traditionally trained to do, right, today in terms of formal education, there's a whole other dimension, a whole other realm that exists, right? Like the power of energy healing. Um I mean, I do a lot of energy healing work with clients myself. I have read a lot of articles that mention that Reiki is actually a form of energetic healing that is actually being practiced in some hospitals today, which
Yeah.
I think is amazing. What I'd love for you to share is really your thoughts on, do you think we're going to, as a society, right, to continue to shift in that direction where doctors who have had, we could say, like just the traditional formal training, right, are going to expand more into leveraging some of those other modalities as a form of healing for their patients.
Yeah, I have a couple things to say in response to what you just said. First of all, let's go back to the dimensional thinking. I don't remember if I mentioned this in what I sent you, but it's very apropos. I'm glad you said that. When I get up on and I do speaking about these topics around healthcare, I actually frame it as four-dimensional thinking. So you are totally right that medicine is very, very siloed. And the way I typically say this is medicine or health is more than individualistic. It's more than medical. It's more than here, and it's more than now. Those are the three dimensions of space and the one dimension of time. Now, I actually think that we live in a world with many dimensions, but let's just focus on the four for now because that's enough, okay? We need more than medical perspectives. We need public health professionals. We need anthropologists. We need theologians. I'll get back to that in a moment. We need historians. We need all these different people telling us, look, this is what health looks like more comprehensively. Think of the famous analogy with the blind men and the elephant, right? Everyone in their specialty is looking at a particular issue from a certain lens. That's great, but let's look through all of the lenses. It's more than individualistic. If I only focus at health on the level of the organism, then I'm missing things that are going on below that. To answer your question, there actually is increasing attention paid to things like cellular medicine, and below that, quantum medicine, which I think is really exciting. That's really cool
Yeah.
stuff. And we have to have the macro levels as well, right? To really affect change at a grand population scale, we need to think about healthcare policy. As everyone knows, that's about to become a really big deal nationally. Um, I'm personally concerned about where that's going, but whatever the case is, healthcare policy is important. No one's going to deny that. So we have to think about it at these levels, not just the individual. Health is more than here. We got to think about preparing in advance. Like, did you have a life insurance policy? Have you had conversations with your spouse or your adult children about, hey, I'm going to die one day. Let's have the conversation about that. Let's not just focus on the moment. And then it's more than here. It's more than local. So anyway, I won't belabor that point, but I'm glad that you mentioned the dimensional thing. I think that we are getting better at expanding our horizons, but it's slow. I'll give you an example to get more into the spiritual parts of it. The question about spiritual forms of healing. I'm in a seminary program right now, and I'm close to the end. But through that, I've learned that there are programs. I've learned about them in Georgia and North Carolina. I assume that they're in other states as well. I'm in Alabama, so I know about them here in the South. But there are programs, especially ones focused more rural health, where they're actually trying to get physicians and faith leaders to work together to address health, because it's not just biomedicine, it's not just biomedical. Health has these other dimensions. So I look at some things like that, quantum medicine, cellular medicine, and then these initiatives to try to get physicians, providers to work with faith leaders. I see those as evidence that we are opening our minds up to having these more expansive approaches to health. But health is one of the oldest institutions, and my goodness, they are really slow to change. So I think that we're going to see bits and pieces of it here and there. I don't know if I can say optimistically that it's going to be major changes in our lifetime, but I hope that
Well,
I'm wrong.
when you talk about slow to change, right? That's in my opinion, the all of the bureaucracy
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
how the current medical model, is being run, big pharma and insurance
Yeah.
and all of those things. And which another, something that I wanted to get your thoughts on, despite your feeling, right, that it's slow to change, which I totally can see how that would be. Our economy today is basically all centered around, war, disease, all
Yeah.
of those things, right? Uh, our future economy, I believe, is going to eventually shift into one that's centered around well-being. You can see what's happening in the world right now, despite all the turmoil that's happening, right? Clearly, you can also see that a lot of people are waking up to what's most important. My question for you is with the light of hope that our economy is going to change for the future to make that shift, what would, the medical model, the model of health, right? Nurturing others to optimal health look like for you in an economy that's centered around well-being?
Yeah. And you're starting to see some things like, and of course, whenever you see a corporation do this, or you mentioned big pharma, that I refer to it as all as the medical industrial complex. You see some things like employee wellness. Let's add in a benefit that pays attention to the fact that our employees need to have good mental health in order to be productive. Those are good initiatives to have within the organization. Of course, they do it because of their own bottom line. We're never going to convince billionaires to stop loving money less. So that's going to be an ongoing problem when it comes to anything related to health because it makes them massive amounts of money. I think, but the fact that more and more organizations are moving to recognizing like, hey, we have to focus on these other aspects of employee health. Caregiving is another big one, or we're not going to survive. So you do see that, but to throw a huge monkey wrench into this, I don't know if it's as much of a monkey wrench as it's going to seem. We got to pay a lot of attention to the roles that AI and biotechnology is going to play. There are people working right now on anti-aging and longevity initiatives to essentially, I'm not exaggerating here, to achieve human immortality. And then there's the question of what increasing roles are AI going to play? And I'm not just talking about how can medicine use AI. It's going well beyond that. I think to the point where it's going to have ethical, moral, and spiritual implications. And how that's going to intersect with the notion of human well-being is something we're going to have to keep an eye on, because if things go to a certain point, I think it could go, completely honest, I think it could go either way when it comes to the concept of human well-being. Either we're going to go all in on it, or that concept is going to disappear completely.
Yeah, wow, that's a big rabbit hole we could go down. And yes, I completely share your perspective on that. Just to provide a small, what may seem like a menial kind of example, right? It's like when you go on the internet now, if you go to do a search on something, the first result that comes up is an AI generated result. And how
Wow,
many people are automatically, without putting any thought into it, just looking at
exactly.
that result as their answer and moving on, right? So there's still value in each individual discerning the information that's coming up for them,
For
right?
now,
To
for
take
now.
in. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, like that's just such a small example, but absolutely yes to what you're saying. It there are a lot of different ways that that can go. What I would really love to see in the future, I mean, now preferably, but in the future, from a medical model standpoint, is that our insurance or whatever those infrastructures are at that point, that whatever healing modality or path to healing and optimal health is suited for a specific person's path, that they're able to afford to pursue that, right? And that it's
Oh,
covered. Not
yeah,
just if it's, an actual hospital visit, but if it's acupuncture, which I know some of that is covered in certain policies today, but like
dry needling, yeah.
acupuncture, any energetic healing modalities like Reiki or anything else, because there are a lot of alternative modalities, energetic healing practices and technologies that exist out there that are not even acknowledged today. But the model as it is today is not built with optimal health in mind.
Yeah, yeah. I acknowledge that you asked that question. I didn't directly address it. I will go to that point. I think that we have some major, major obstacles in the way to reaching that point. And one of them is this assumption that, and listen, I love a lot of my physicians. I think most of the ones that I like would agree with me on the following point. We have this assumption that what physicians say is biblical truth. One of the main things that I talk to my clients or anyone I'm speaking to about a patient or caregiver, like, listen, you don't have to just accept what your doctor tells you at face value. Push back. If you have a question, ask the question. Go get
Yeah.
multiple opinions, right? So my most recent faculty gig, I was teaching global health at a university in Georgia. And when COVID hit, I'm just giving an example of what I'm saying here, the authority that medicine is given in this society. And of course, when it hit in March 2020, and we were scrambling around like every other university, like every other organization, like what do we do about this? And we did eventually go online. But they would send us weekly updates or monthly updates, the president of the university would, and he would always say, this is what Mercer's infectious disease expert says. And it was the same person, and it was a physician. And I'm thinking that there's no problem at all. That's great that you have a physician who's talking about this, but why is he automatically assumed to be the utmost authority on this. I worked in the global health department, and I know for a fact they didn't ask any of us, all trained in public health, about our opinions. I had friends who were colleagues over in the School of Public Health, and none of them were asked. And I'm like, this is a pandemic. That is a public health issue. Why is it that a physician's word is considered to be biblical truth over and above anyone else's? But that's how it is nationwide. That is reflective of how we view things in general. And that is a massive obstacle that lies in the way of achieving some of these things that you're mentioning. I hate the fact that that's the case, but I believe it's going to be
Well,
very
I think
difficult
it's
to
already
overcome that.
started shifting though. I think it's starting to shift because I think there's more awareness. Now, is that going to happen tomorrow? Right? Like, probably not. But it's conversations like the ones that you and I are having right now. The more of these kind of conversations that we're having to raise awareness out there, to encourage other people to basically take their power back, right? Because
Yeah.
empirical model is included, right, in that conformist kind of society that we've all been, conditioned to live in, where, everything is cookie cutter. There's only one way to health. There's only one way to success. It's like people are giving their power away all the time. We could have a whole
Yeah. Oh,
podcast
yeah.
episode about the
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
conversation.
Well, you say that it's starting to shift, but do you see it shift in terms of health insurance covering more of these things? Because
No,
to
not
me,
yet.
but that's where the real clincher is for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I have physical therapy for debilitating back pain, and I tried dry needling, which is the same thing as acupuncture, but they have to call it dry needling in order for insurance to cover it. They cannot label, like the CPT code has to say dry needling, or
Yeah.
they're not going to cover it. I have a hard time this is something I hope I'm wrong about, but I have a hard time imagining insurance companies allowing there to be a CPT code for something that's not uh, the what we'll refer to as traditional medicine or Western biomedicine.
Right. That
The,
requires a complete paradigm shift.
yeah, and again, that goes back to the people who run insurance companies. They are wealthy because Americans are sick. We would have to convince those billionaires to stop loving money. I hope that I'm not coming across as jaded, which I probably am, but
You're not, but what I want to say to that, right, to what you just said is that that is also part of, I believe, the societal conditioning that we've been brought up in, right? It's like, is it true that billionaires will never stop loving money? That's probably true, right? But does that automatically mean that we can't make that kind of paradigm shift? I believe that we can, and the awareness that we can eventually, right? The awareness I'm talking about starts with those kind of shifts, start with each one of us feeling into what feels like truth for us and what can be possible for us versus continuing to try to live within those existing systems, which we all know aren't optimal, right? That's why you're
yeah,
doing the work that you're doing, which is so expansive. I really want to go deeper into that conversation, but there's a couple of other really pertinent topics that I would love to
sure.
get your thoughts around today. So, I'd love, so you've said, right? And I'm finding my place here in my notes, so bear with me, everyone. Um, right. You've said that you think quantum mechanics practically forces us to examine the metaphysical dimensions of our consciousness, self, and universe. I absolutely agree with that because I believe that everything is interconnected. Share more with us your thoughts behind that.
Yeah. Well, let's get a couple of definitions out of the way first. I want to make it very clear that I try very hard, and this is difficult. We live in a siloed world. Whenever we create a definition of something, that means that we're defining that thing as that definition, and everything else that's not that definition. So we're putting something in a box. And that's how physical and metaphysical are treated. In reality, what I actually think is the case is that it's a smooth continuum. I don't see this distinct separation between our physical selves, which is what we perceive on day-to-day basis, and the metaphysical. I think we just haven't learned to access all aspects of that spectrum, so it seems like they're separate, distinct categories. So I want to get that out of the way. It depends on how we define metaphysical, but I want to get that out of the way so you can understand where I'm coming from. I think that the double slit experiment is one of the most important experiments of all time. I have spoken with a couple of physicist friends of mine, and they say that it doesn't have anything to do with metaphysics. But in my opinion, if you extend it logically, it gets us to the point of realizing that, and what I mean by metaphysical is something that is beyond the the conceptualization of empirical science. And empirical science is a wonderful tool, a wonderful set of tools. We absolutely need empirical science. We need the peer review process. We need the scientific method, and that like we live and breathe by a physical materialist view of the universe. That's what our everyday lives are. But that doesn't mean that it's the only set of tools. What I would like to see is that people expand their toolbox and realize there are these other ways of seeing things. And I think when you do that, you realize that there are concepts that we're not going to be able to understand if we restrict ourselves to an empiricist only viewpoint. I think, I don't know if I'm going to step on any toe, ruffle any feathers here, but I think when people, even if they don't realize they're doing it, when people use terms like God, that's their best attempt to define what I'm talking about here, that there's something beyond ourselves. We have various terms for that, right? I think there were what, over 20 terms for God in the old Christian Old or Jewish Old Testament alone. Anyway, um, I think I forgot your question, but was it basically why do I think quantum mechanics forces us to
Yeah,
think
that's
about
it.
this?
Exactly it. Yes. We're
I
covering
mean, I
quite a
mean,
lot of ground here. So
yeah, I mean, I just think that we have to ask ourselves something is clearly going on here because quantum mechanics terrifies a lot of classical physicists because they don't know what to do with it. But don't shy away from it. I don't think that it topples the rest of our world. I think it's just another set of tools. It's another lens through which we can view our universe. And I hope to see that more and more people apply a quantum perspective to what they're doing. Like I said, quantum medicine is a real thing. It's a real thing. There's more
yeah,
science backing it up.
we
You
create
know,
our own reality.
yeah, if you really dig deep enough, that the book that I referred to before you hit record was Paul Levy's Quantum Revelation. That's been massively influential for me. And if we think about it, what we call empiricism, that's really just me observing something. So essentially everything is subjective, right? I can't prove that a chair exists. I only know in myself that I perceive that chair to exist, kind of thing. And I know this is way too deep to get into in just 15 to 20 minutes, but I just think that we owe it to ourselves to consider whether consider viewing the universe through some of these perspectives. Is simulation theory, does it have some truth to it? Are there multiple universes or multiple dimensions? Is it possible to go faster than the speed of light? Or, all these different questions. What happens inside a black hole? I personally think that every single one of those questions are related to one another. We just don't have the empirical science to fill in the gaps yet.
I believe
That's what I
that.
mean.
Yeah, I believe that too.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say metaphysical. Um, I do believe it's possible that we can strive toward, as an individual, if not as an entire society, toward having a better understanding of these concepts, other than through empiricism, perhaps really deep meditation. I've known people personally who have taken psilocybin and they had some of those kinds of experiences. Um, I maybe dreams. I think that we have some kind of access to it, but it's not our everyday level of functioning. Maybe in the future it will be, and I don't know. Maybe AI will make it easier. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think AI is the answer. So I do a lot of psychic channeling, kind of multidimensional work as well, right? I think the answer for us because whether you want to call this science, spirituality, or whatever, we aren't even scratching the surface of our own potential right now as multidimensional beings, right?
Yeah. Oh
We're
yeah.
interconnected with the cosmos well beyond, the planet that we're living on. And there are all these different spaces and times and dimensions that exist from within us that we have the ability to open ourselves up to tune into. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Gaia Network.
Spell that.
It's GAIA. GAIA, so Gaia as
Oh,
in
Gaia. Okay.
Mother
Yeah.
Earth, right? The Gaia network. They have a program on their network. I think it's called Channeling, but it's a short series with a few episodes where they actually explain in really clear, like easy to understand, like layman's terms kind of detail, right? Like what it means for a human being to further open their ability to connect
Yeah.
beyond their
Yeah.
their personal existence, right?
I'll check it out.
Yeah, yeah, it's really informative. It's really informative, and I think you'd appreciate, it adding to our discussion here, what we're talking about. Um,
Well, if you don't mind, I wanted to respond to the comment on AI.
oh, sure, go ahead.
I I don't know that we're gonna. I won't say that I disagree because I'm betting you might agree with me on the following point. One way in which I think AI can help us potentially, it could go the opposite direction. It's just like the splitting of the atom bomb, right? That went in one direction definitively.
Yeah,
Well, no, I guess it was two, energy from it. But anyway, I think that AI, the more that it's integrated into our everyday lives, can help us to see what exactly are the boundaries that we perceive around the concept of what we mean by self, right? And I think that when we run up against those so-called boundaries, that's when we realize that, wow, there really isn't a boundary between between yourself and myself, or myself and that tree over there. And in my opinion, I think that AI, I'm not saying it will for sure. I think it has the potential to show us that there's more beyond the self than what we realize because um yeah, I'll leave it there. I think that's what I mean when I think AI could help us.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know what? I agree with you, and I actually hold both perspectives. To further elaborate what I was saying when that comes from within, it's just like I was thinking of AI in terms of in the context of it providing an external perspective. And so, what I meant when I was responding before, in that the answer is within, is that ultimately we already have the intelligence. We possess the universal intelligence from within us through tapping into that, where we are intuitively feeling guided to. That doesn't mean that there isn't an external resource that we don't find informative, helpful, or even a catalyst, right, to change our lives. But one of the things that I believe has inherently been hindering us for thousands of years, right, is the societal conditioning that we always have to look outside of ourselves for the answers.
Hmm. Okay. I will give my parallel statement to that. I think we're probably saying the same thing.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I hold both perspectives. Yeah.
What I think is hindering us is that we're so conditioned to consider the individual organism as the only or most important unit of analysis,
Right.
right? But when I Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene is another very influential book. When he actually, I agree with this. We assume that the important unit of analysis when it comes to Darwinian and evolutionary pressures is the organism or the species. It's actually the gene, he says, and I agree with that. And so what would it be like for us to think not from the perspective of our individual brains, but from the perspective of a gene or a cell or that
Oh,
rock over there
yes.
or an entire planet? Like
Yes.
those have their own entities and selves as well. And
Yes.
so, what can we do to expand our thinking beyond our own individual selves and see what's going on at these other levels? And we have evidence of it happening. Let's think about school spirit, right? Or patriotism. Those concepts don't exist with the individual alone. Those are synergistic. They happen. It's the concept of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts kind of thing. So we do some things that kind of show that, but we don't do enough. Let's really talk about how we think beyond ourselves. So I agree with thinking inwardly. I just see it as let's not just think as creatures walking around with a brain.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's we might have been talking about this before our conversation with the listeners today, right? But we talked about essentially how each one of us are these unique beings, yet we're all also interconnected,
Yeah.
interconnected, right?
Yeah.
We also all share commonalities. And so I feel like what is for one is for all, because although we all have different backgrounds and different ways of being and different conditioning, there are a lot of similarities on our paths.
Yeah. Well, I was a psychology minor in undergrad, and then I have a social work degree. But probably the most insightful thing I've learned in any psych course was in high school. And I remember she said, it's the only thing I remember from that course.
Yeah.
Everyone has two selves. You have the self that you perceive yourself to be, and you have the self that everyone else perceives you to be. And neither of those is more or less truthful than the other. And that's just mind blowing that let's talk about what the real implications of that are.
Well, yeah, there's perception. Well, our perception is influenced, our reality is influenced by our own individual conditioning, right? Like,
yeah,
even what you're understanding from what I'm saying right now may be different from my own perception of what I'm saying
absolutely.
right now.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
it's quite fascinating. It's very interesting. Yes, there are just like lots of different conversations that we could spin off of what we're talking about today because we're touching on some big, amazing topics, but with the objective, right? Really, that for those of you who are listening today, to allow this to provoke your thoughts, right? To stimulate new ideas, new possibilities around what's possible for us.
Yeah. And I will add on to that point. I usually ask how you feel about colorful language. If you need to beat this out, that's fine, but I don't know a better way to state the following. When it comes to reading about quantum mechanics, metaphysics, and these different having conversations like this, I have to take breaks because it really fucks with my mind. And I think people should give themselves some grace in realizing that attaining this kind of mindset, one that I haven't attained, like I don't even know that it's right to say attained because that suggests that there's an endpoint, and it's not an endpoint. Like it is a journey. And
It's an evolution.
if you think that you can only take a little bit at a time, that's better than nothing. But practice grace on yourself. If you realize, like, oh, I believe that there are multiple dimensions, but I don't know how to wrap my mind around it, that's okay. That is okay. Like, this is not something. I knew a friend who took psilocybin, and he described the experience as ineffable. This is what we're talking about is ineffable. Our brains are not sufficient to understand, to grasp that, right? Um, so just practice grace on yourself as you work through these. Definitely try to expand your mind, but I don't know that our physical beings are designed to try to do it every second.
No, and you know what? I think that looks different based upon an individual's
Yeah,
path,
absolutely. For
right?
sure.
That's
Yeah.
unique. It's really feeling into what feels right for you, what feels aligned for you. I speak a lot about being deeply anchored into what truth feels like for you in your body and
Hmm.
using that as the basis to navigate making a lot of those kinds of decisions, which again, that in of itself can look different based upon the person's unique path. But absolutely, creating that space to
Yeah.
really take it in is everything.
Yeah, for sure. And it can also be tough to find the practical implications of this, but I think it has so many practical implications in our here and everyday lives. I mean, let's think about social justice and diversity and trying to understand someone else's perspective. I mean, when it gets down to it, the way that I see this is I view the universe through my particular lens. You view yours through your particular lens. Our lenses probably have some overlap, but not complete overlap. And anyway, there's no way we can possibly know if they do.
Yeah.
So when someone who is different socio-demographically from me, they're a person of color, or they have an LGBT plus identity, or I have disability, or they're some other religion. I think we should strive to put down our lens, at least for a moment, when we're engaging with these people. Like, imagine you're meeting someone and you have a one-on-one conversation with someone who's really different from you. At least
Yeah.
for the span of that 1 hour conversation, put down your own lens and do the best that you can to see the universe through their lens. You're not going to be perfect at it, but you can do more than what you're doing now. And in my opinion, if more people did that more often, then that is the closest that I can think of to solving all of our world's problems, is
Yeah,
being able to see through other people's lenses and see through their perspectives. And I think that's one of the main problems. We're not doing that enough for fill in the blank with whatever issue is going on right
absolutely.
now. Fill in the blank.
Compassion, empathy. Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. Absolutely. That would change our world.
And I think that is part of what we're talking about here.
Yep,
It's just viewing things through a different lens, right? We're so unwilling to do that. And if you open yourself up to that, I mean, you're not opening yourself up to a world of opportunities. You're opening yourself up to a universe of opportunities.
absolutely. Jacob, in closing, is there anything else that you're feeling guided to bring forward?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's too simple to say just have an open mind. I've struggled with finding the best way to get people to see the value of this. I typically use the language like I was just doing of put down your own lens and pick someone else's up. And I'm still playing around with that one, but
Yeah,
whatever language makes the most sense for you, just try to do it. And again, don't do it all the time. Just try to do it sometime, right?
yeah,
If you have a hard time understanding people who identify as trans, then tell yourself that the next time you have a conversation with them, instead of jumping to judgment, jump to curiosity. That's what I would say.
yeah,
Uh, Ted Lasso, in one of my favorite scenes in that entire series, he misattributes it to Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman didn't actually say this, but it's still a great quote. Be curious, not judgmental. That's what I would say. As many moments in your life as you can, be curious rather than judgmental. And I
yeah.
think that's gonna, yeah,
One is evolutionary, and the other one is fear-based.
yeah, yeah,
Anything that's fear-based, we want to look to steer away from because that's not part of our true nature. Our true nature is to be curious, to seek to create, to always be expanding. I love that. Thank you so much. Jacob, for those who want to connect with you more, where is the best place for them to go?
yeah. Mainly what I'm doing right now is helping, like you said at the beginning, patients and caregivers who want to navigate the system better, how to interact with their providers, different things like that. And my website is thesmartpatient.com, thesmartpatient.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I know folks can find you on LinkedIn as well, right? In terms of social media.
Yeah, Jacob Evans Kendall is my LinkedIn handle, or whatever they call
Wonderful.
it.
We will have those links for everybody in the show notes as well. I really want to honor you for the work that you're doing, and the perspectives that you shared today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and to share all of your wisdom and knowledge with our listeners. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the great discussion. I enjoyed it and
Thank
appreciate the
you.
work you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Path of the Awakened Heart. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or pathoftheawakenedheart.com so you never miss an episode. To learn more about living with an awakened heart and navigating your ascension journey, visit me at jenniferspore.com.